All right, perfect. Welcome to another episode of Paranormal, the New Normal. I am your host, as always, Jeremy, trying to make this world seem a little more normal, but these days that's just impossible. But with me today is a guest who maybe can make your world seem a little bit more normal by what she does as a profession. My guest today is Desiree Scherini, who is a board certified master hypnotherapist, which I am excited to talk to her because, as all my longtime listeners know, I've yet to have a hypnotherapist in this show. So let's get right into it. How you doing tonight, Desiree?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Jeremy. I'm glad to be here.
And we're definitely glad to have you here. So the first question I ask everybody is, what made you want to get into the paranormal slash spirituality world that hypnotherapy falls into?
Well, so first off, I have to split that into two answers. So, as a professional hypnotherapist, I have to say, no, it's not all woo woo. However, some of it can be woo woo, especially in some of the areas I work in. Um, if we get into past life or spiritual regressions. But then on the other hand, there's real practical stuff like stop smoking, stop biting your nails, lose weight, motivation, all that. That's pretty normal. But probably like you, I'm guessing, and anyone else listening, isn't there kind of a part of us that, for those of us that are interested in this sort of stuff, that it started when we were pretty young, or just kind of always liking that uh, the other side information idea, whereas other people were perfectly happy on this plane of reality. I always thought it was kind of interesting to kind of mentally explore the other side.
Yes, which I agree. I mean, there are plenty of us who don't feel like we ever fit into society, and we felt like we needed to do something to make us fit more in a society, and
Mhm.
whether that would be quit drinking so heavily or quit smoking, which I mean, smoking is a thing most people in society do at some point, so
Yeah.
I can't really say that, but yeah, so I agree. I agree. So what made you want to get into this profession? Like, was that just it that you wanted to feel different,
No.
or
Yeah. I think at the core of me there was an interest in what's not visible. You know, that might be the mind, that might be the spirit world. But a few things went into it. My bachelor's degree is in psychology. I've always leaned toward the helping fields, kind of that direction. And um, one of these synchronicities that I ended up going into this training that I took for becoming a hypnotherapist 10 years ago. I just saw, do you know who the Edgar Casey ARE Center is? You familiar with him and that center at all?
sounds familiar, but I
Right.
can't say I could place
He,
it.
he, he was known as the Sleeping Prophet, and he opened a center in Virginia Beach, Virginia, even though he was from the Midwest someplace. But there they do research and courses and such. Nonetheless, I was a member of that organization, and I got a postcard in the mail that says, hey, we're training hypnotherapists. And it happened to be during a window of time where I had the money and I had the time. Um, and I thought, huh, that sounds interesting. I'd never been hypnotized or anything. But as it would happen, I'll kind of cut to the chase here. It wasn't just straightforward clinical hypnotherapy, it was transpersonal hypnotherapist, which explains why they were at the Edgar Casey Center. And transpersonal being that it's mind, body, spirit, and not just so clinical, only stop smoking, only lose weight, that sort of stuff, but also go into that spiritual connection with hypnosis. So that's how I ended up doing it. Um, just wanting to do something that was helpful to people, and I saw this opportunity to do hypnotherapy, and I thought that sounds really interesting. And then, really it being the perfect type of hypnotherapy for my perfect weirdness.
I like that. I like that because I like that you just didn't want to do like the hypnotherapy you could see in every town where it's, oh, quit smoking today or your money back, lose 30 pounds in a week or your money back, like that
Yeah.
type of. for lack of a better word, those scam artists, basically. That
No,
I
I do
mean,
a lot of
it
that,
works.
but it works.
Oh,
Yeah,
I mean,
I do
it
it
works,
all.
but I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. We won't even go into that, but yeah, I had somebody come to me um, who had seen somebody else locally, and what did they want? They wanted, I forgot what they were working on, but they were told by this other person, oh, it's going to be $4,000. You have to come twice a week, and you have to do this, and you have to do this, and da 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 da. And when she came to me, I'm like, well, I like to do it one session at a time, see how you're doing. You come back as you feel you want more motivation, and we go in that direction. And I think she had one or two meetings and resolved what she was working on, and we were both pleased. So when you talk about, there are these people that have these programs, massive programs, and that's fine. But I approach it differently.
yeah, it's similar to like the psychic world, because I've had people on here who said the same thing about the psychic world, where they have clients who come to them and they say, "Oh, this I talked to this psychic in town, and they wanted me to go light 40 candles at a church and have to pay them like $10,000 per candle to bless each one," and
Yeah.
it's ridiculous.
I had a friend who, this girl approached three of my friend and two others while we were having lunch. And she says, I'm getting an energy from you on. I feel I want to do a reading. Anyway, so one of my friends continued to go see her. And she called me from this girl's place and said, she says I have to give her $800 so she could go buy this relic. And only she's the one who can get it for me. And I have to take it home and sleep with it under my pillow. And I'm like, do not do that. Do not give her $800 for a relic. It's like, no. Oh God.
A relic that she probably has a crate of, sitting in her freaking bedroom, that she sells to people all the time. Yeah,
old dog bones from behind the animal shelter.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Oh.
So, the second question I always ask in this show, and that's kind of the point of the show, is this question, but it's about more than that as well. Have you had any experiences with anything spirit related or anything like that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Um, I'll start probably at my youngest experience. And just the other day, I've never been like very much into UFOs or ET or that sort of stuff. I think as I've gotten older, though, I start to recognize that anything can be vibrational, being on
Yeah,
different frequencies, whether it's an ET or a spirit or a ghost or whatever, that it's just a different frequency. And so when I was about 11, and so it occurred to me, the reason I bring that up is because I thought maybe I was abducted and never even thought of it that way. Okay. Because everybody says, I was watching a video, I'm like, gee, they're all describing my experience, except for I never thought I was abducted. But so I'm in my bed. I'm about 11 years old, in my bed in the middle of the night, and something wakes me up, and I sit up, and there's this ball of light just kind of floating around at the foot of my bed. And I am scared stiff, literally just sitting there, not moving and I don't, it felt like an eternity, drenched in sweat, just terrified to even move because there's a ball of light floating around my room. And finally, it kind of went out the window. I had a window, it went out the window. And then I can still see it, all these years later, I can still see this happening. And so I sat there for a little while thinking, okay, it's gone. I get up out of bed, and it's like I'm 11 years old. I don't go to my parents and say, yeah, there's a ball of light. No, I go take a shower, change into a dry nightgown, and go to sleep. Like, looking back, I'm like, that was just weird to do. And years later, I told my mom about it as an adult. She goes, why didn't you come tell us? I said, I don't know. It didn't even occur. I didn't want to bother anyone. So that was years ago. Through hypnosis, I've done on others, but also with myself, done the process called Life Between Lives, where it's a hypnosis that very deep, takes 3 to 5, sometimes 6 hours, and you help facilitate the person hypnotically to go into the spirit world. So I've had my own experience there. And that was in particular after my mom died in 2019. But the day I was there with her and her and my dad, and in their condo when she died. And the next morning she comes to me. She was psychic, by the way. So she would see things, know things. She had quite a couple of stories. But so I'm half awake, half asleep. And that is the state that you kind of have to be in for hypnosis as well as for deep meditation, or as well, this is when that's somehow your window's open to this sort of stuff. But she came to me, and I'm laying there and I see her like she looks but with my eyes closed. I know it's not her physically, but she's standing by the side of my bed. And she has these 3 flat stones in front of her getting taller, and it's 3 flat smooth stones like this. And she does this motion up. And in my, like, cognitively, I'm hearing build me up and something about her bed. And I'm like, okay. I tell my sister and dad about it, and we're not knowing what exactly was this message. And a couple days later, we're at the cemetery to choose a place. And he says, well, there's this area over here, there's this area over here. Or he puts in front of us a picture. He says, or there's the new mausoleum. And it's a large monolithic stone structure with smooth, flat stones. And we all look at each other. And my dad said, well, she never wanted to get buried. Like, so she was saying she wants to be in the mausoleum. So she has a top floor corner up there now. And along with my dad, who just passed. But then, I mean, I could go on, but then a few months later, talking to my dad, he was missing her very much. And I seemed to have dreams about her, or kind of somewhat more connected in that way. And so I thought, well, I'll ask her, So one day I wake up and I'm half asleep and I'm like, hey, Mom, Mom, you there? And I'm like, do you have a message I can give to Daddy so that, he knows you're, thinking of him or sending a message to him? And she tells me there's a wooden box with a note or a card or a letter that has pink flowers on it. And it's in the right-hand corner of this wooden box. So, and I go tell my dad, and I'm trying to make this not too long. I do have this on a podcast. I put it up Halloween a couple years ago. It's called Ghosts in the Spirit World, I think. But I describe it in detail. But I tell my dad, and he says, well, there is a wooden chest out in the storage area. So we go out there and we're digging through, and there is an envelope in the right-hand corner that has pink flowers on the border. And it's a letter that she had written to him like many years before, like 25 years before, when he was on business trip. And it said return to sender, and he'd never even gotten it. But for some reason, it's still there. And in the letter, it talked about the first time they met, the first time they said they loved each other, and how she missed him, and et cetera, so forth. And it was like basically a love letter. And so I just thought that was, very sweet, and obviously a message for my dad. There's a few other things, but yes, I've had some interesting stuff.
Yeah, that's actually adorable.
Yeah.
Like, when I love when stories come through like that, like, and it actually proves like it's something simple, but it's just amazing. It's a good story because it's so simple that it's believable. No one's gonna ever say, "Oh, that can't be true." Like, obviously, it's true.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, how would I know there's an envelope with pink flowers on it and it turned out to be a letter to my dad, But yeah, sweet.
But yeah, I mean, it's very sweet,
Hmm.
and it gives hope. Gives hope that you could talk to your loved ones after death. It really does. But I also saw that you wrote a book, and I was hoping we could talk about that for a bit.
Sure.
It's called Journey to Joy: The Written Path.
Yeah, and that's more along the life coaching line. It's about journaling, and it's mostly my own journaling when I was going through a difficult time of just writing. And the idea is to just start writing. Like, don't even like have a plan. Don't say I'm going to write about this or I'm going to write about that. Just, it's almost like a stream of consciousness. Just start writing and see what comes out. And then what happened for me after I decided to write every day for 15 minutes a day, I was going through, difficulties with my ex and having to make a decision. And But by the end of 30 days of doing that, I had clarity, made up my mind, knew what I wanted to do, knew exactly how I felt about everything, and was able to move forward. So my book is a hybrid of my writings, but made into steps along the way for someone else to read and maybe be inspired to get ideas. And then at the end of every chapter, I have writing prompts for someone to move along to their own clarity and finding their own way toward whatever it is they feel stuck in, to get unstuck.
Yeah, I mean, journaling has for a lot of people, journaling works. For me, it never necessarily
Yeah.
worked. I'm a mental person. I don't like to write things down. Like even my boss
Mhm.
tells me all the time, and he's like, "Why don't you write these things down?" I'm like, "'Cause I have a good memory and everything sticks up there, and I have like a to-do list in my head at all times, so it works.
Yeah, I have.
Not everybody can do it, but
I kind of left off in my experiences, and I don't know if you I don't know if you would have come across this, but um, I recently had I had a brain hemorrhage, two brain surgeries, and was in the hospital for a month. But
oh no, I did not come across that, and I am terribly sorry that had happened to you. But
me too. Yeah, thank you. So, what happened though with the first surgery, there was an accident, which is why there was a second surgery where they had to cut me open, go in and fix things. But the first surgery had an accident and caused blindness in my left eye. So, at first I was like, is it the drugs or what's going on here? But I had the most interesting visual experiences right after losing the sight. For like days, I was seeing hallucinations. But I knew they were hallucinations. And I would say to the doctors, I'm like, there's somebody standing next to you. If I know there's not really someone next to you, is it really a hallucination, or is it like, and they're like, okay. And once again, I did record this, and if anyone's interested in, what I saw when I lost my sight was what I called it. It was trippy. It was like there was like a speakeasy party going on the ceiling. Everyone was in black and white and jewels and all dressed like the 1930s, 40s, but it was all black and white. And then in front of me was like a grid, like the Matrix. So it was like overlaying between me and reality, that I would see these geometric patterns as if they were scratched in light in the air in front of me. Straight lines, all these geometric patterns. People walking through the room. So there were three different things. And but spiritually, maybe this one, everything was in black and white, except for this one little girl was over here on my blind side, but I could see her. And but I mean, she was in my visions, and she was there for a couple days, and she looked like she came straight out of the 1950s. Little brown hair, yellow dress, sweet little cherubic, like she was a butter commercial or something, right? And and she just was all like always hanging around right there. And I asked her in my brain, as I'm laying there like hi or whatever, what's your name? And her name's Marjorie. So finally, after a couple days, I said, Marjorie, and I was in ICU. So it occurred to me, like, who knows? Maybe I'm seeing some past residents that are somehow I had this little veil lifted because of everything that just happened with me. And I was seeing things that you might not normally see, right? And I asked Marjorie, I said, you don't have to stay here. I said, you can go to the light. And then I'm seeing this light up in the corner of the room. I said, see? I said, if you go toward the light, it's much better there. You don't have to stay here. And so she looks up, looks at me, and it's almost like she floats up to the light and then she waves goodbye as she kind of disappears through the corner of the room. And she never came back. So I guess hopefully she found her way. And, this is the sort of thing that people say, well, you're really like, what are you smoking? And I'm like, well, there was something in the IV, but that same stuff was in the IV. But, when the vision started to go away, when they moved me to a different room. And I thought, well, that's interesting. So all this stuff was happening in ICU room 2. Going down the hall after they put me in a stabilized room, I'm like, party was down in room 2.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
certain rooms could easily be more haunted, for lack of a better word, than others. Like just more more spirits remain there because more
Mhm.
spirits died in that room than any other room. It's just the way it goes sometimes.
Yeah, it was really interesting, and none of it was scary to me. It was just fascinating. I mean, people. I'm sure anyone come to visit me, or the nurses thought I was like off my. I'm like just watching it, going, wow. Oh,
What, but you mentioned earlier that you do past life regression hypnosis,
yeah.
which I've had a few past life regressionists on here as well, and it's a fascinating topic that I love to talk about. So tell me about, I guess, well, how do you do it? Because everybody does it different from what I've heard.
So being a hypnotherapist, a lot of the time when I'm doing it, a lot of the time it's used therapeutically. So somebody has a current day issue they just can't figure out. We go to the source, might be go to the past life where this can be resolved, or where this has happened before, or where you need to break a pattern. However, a lot of people do just come out of interest. So the way I do it is the the process is pretty much the same I use with any hypnosis, which is um, I might have somebody use a focal point, or to start, but a lot of guided imagery toward relaxation. And like, now you're just floating down the easy river, or maybe you're floating in space, or whatever it is. Progressive relaxation, meaning like go through and have them relax all their muscles. What are called deepening techniques, counting back, counting down. So I do all these step down things to get their conscious mind to kind of give up and take a break. And um, and then I suggest either something like there's a timeline and they float back on it, or sometimes I might use a hall of mirrors, and you look in the walk up to a mirror and you see yourself in a past life. Um, but usually it's one of those two. So that's the process. And then once they're there, I start asking questions, take notes, and usually record for them. Um, and I say, usually start with like, look around, what's happening, or look down, what are you wearing? Look at your hands, what color are your hands? Look at yourself, are you a man or a woman? And kind of build on who else is there. I usually try to ask them what year it is, if there's a city or their name first and last, because then, they could potentially go and look that person up. And
Yeah.
and a lot of people have found, not just a couple clients of my own. I have one of my fellow hypnotherapists. She said she looked at the newspaper, saw the date, knew her name, knew the town, and was able to go and look up this person and actually see the landmarks that she described in her past life experience. So people say, "Oh, I don't believe in past lives." I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, when you come back, you will." Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a full believer in past lives, and I was actually supposed to have with one of my previous guests. I was supposed to have a past life session, but she had a family emergency, and we haven't gotten around to rebooking it yet. But I do look forward to it because, I mean, everybody hopes that they're King Arthur or they're Napoleon or some big person in their past life. But I mean, we all know that's not usually the way it goes. Usually, you're just another
Yeah,
common person. But
it is interesting. I've been like, I think the first time I had one done for me, I went back to being like, not Pocahontas, but like an Indian woman. It's like nothing I've ever. I'm not like an Indian aficionado, a Native American. Some people are into something, and so they're like, oh well, I didn't expect it at all. And I expected, once I realized I was Native American, that I expected to be out west, because those are the kind of Native Americans I pictured. And then I said, but there's pine trees here, and I was totally confused. Like, what am I doing with pine trees? And so I think that adds the legitimacy, is when someone drops into a past life that they wouldn't have made up on purpose.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'd hate to be the person that goes into their past life and they realized they were Hitler or something, but
Yeah,
like that wouldn't be the pleasant one for sure. Or you realize you're working in a
yeah.
death camp or in a bad battle in World War II or something like that. Like that'd be horrible. But
He's working off some karma.
well, yeah, basically.
And something about that too is, you know, I'll throw this in there because some people say, well, how could so many people have said they're Cleopatra? You couldn't all be Cleopatra, right? But
Exactly.
there's one concept of the idea, and this actually kind of makes sense if we think about it this way, that, energetically, we're not like in a sealed package, right? So we and others could be expressing ourselves through like a shared energy, shared frequency. So it's possible that I or you could have both experienced being Cleopatra, because we're not, it's like a drop in the ocean kind of a thing. We're all the
Yeah.
ocean. You don't encapsulate you share this thing. So that was one explanation that, well, I guess that's how it could work, because, and then the whole time and space thing is like, once we're out of this timeline in our bodies, it's, it's probably all happening at the same time, because time is irrelevant. So it's like,
Yeah, it is. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, as they say, time's a river. You can go forward or you can go backward in it. Like, you just have
Mhm.
to figure out the right way to do it. But so, what is life between lives hypnotic regression? I saw that in your page, and I was kind of interested in that.
That it's really fascinating. So what that is, um, it's, the process is similar in that you get the person very, very relaxed. But the end goal of the process is to go into that time before you are born into this lifetime. So you take them back just briefly into their most recent past life, temporally, as we can understand it. Take them through their death into going into the spirit world from there before they're born here, with the idea, um, that in between lives, it's kind of like their soul school, right?
Yeah.
Where there's some adjustments, some evaluations, some choices. You know how this now, one of the things people say is, oh, you choose your parents, you choose whatever. So there's the concept of that decisions are made on a soul level about what needs to happen in your next incarnation to help either deal with, like being Hitler, deal with some karma, or to move forward as a soul. And if you can picture the idea that, here we go to kindergarten through, 12th grade school, and then finally you graduate and you don't have to go back. So that's sort of a metaphor, I guess, for the idea that as spiritual beings, that we can grow until, you get to that sort of state that you don't have to keep coming back. Um, anyway, but Michael Newton is well known for his books on this. I think he came upon it um, randomly with clients a couple of clients that spontaneously went into this state of being. Instead of going into a past life, they were seeing spiritual or explaining things that didn't make sense as physical world. So he decided to study this, and I think he had over 2,000. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but um, so many clients. And what he discovered was there seemed to be a pattern, that this spiritual place, even though it's not a physical place, it actually had steps along the way that didn't always go in the same order, but that what these people experienced in their process, and they didn't know each other, they didn't share notes, and it was a little
Yeah.
unique to each person, but it's actually a process that it seems like people go through. And so I did have it done for me. And once again, sort of like the past life, it didn't go in the order I was expecting, but the stages did show up. So I was like, huh, something to this. And in that, it was some months after my mom had passed, and I saw her and everybody I knew. I forgot to tell you this part, but she was this. I was this glowing blue, whatever, energetic thing, and she was kind of this gold and yellow, brownish, lit up thing, and she kind of came forward, and you kind of have to be there. But one of the things she did say to me when I asked her about a message for my dad, I really felt like I had this conversation. I said, so we're going back a little bit, but I said, so Mom, while I got you, what's it like there? She says, oh, it's beautiful. I'm beautiful. Everything's beautiful. And I ask her who else is there because both my godparents had passed. I have a sister who's passed. And she says, yes, they're here. They're here. And she goes, and Donnie's here. And Donnie was a dog that she had even before I was born, like a favorite pet. And then she says, you're here too. You just don't know it. And I was like, okay. Ironically, she's the first person I heard that from. And then in studying further for this Life Between Lives certification that was coming some months later, I heard it again from Michael Newton. And then I also read a 100-year-old little book for a presentation I was making. And that person who had psychically traveled 100 years ago to this realm said the same thing. So like that drop in the ocean, not all of us is poured into a glass every time we reincarnate. A chunk of our energy is always in that spirit world. So when they say that when someone goes to like heaven or whatever, everything is perfect, everyone they love is there, they are apparently. But down here, we're not experiencing it because we're in this physical shell that we, unless you go to a deep meditation, a hypnotic state or something like that, or some people, are just have their veil more open that they can experience it. So, and it's really a fascinating process.
It does sound very fascinating, and to be able to go and actually experience like the in between, or as they call,
Mm-hmm.
or the beyond as they call it in some different places. But
Yeah.
I mean, just or even I mean, you guess you could even call it purgatory, I guess, kind of. Because do you
Well,
believe it's like a waiting room where our spirits are waiting there to be reincarnated when we passed, or?
well, I don't think it's so much purgatory. For some, there can be an area where they got to go to remedial classes, like but for most, I think and they talk about in everyone's experiences, and I did too. I saw it as like these light forms start to take shape, and my conscious, my brain, human brain starts to make sense of it, and I'm like, oh, I'm seeing these lights. Oh, it turns into this large like library building. So everyone describes this place of learning, and some people will describe it more. So there's almost like you go to school and come back out a little better off. And so the thing is, it's not really purgatory like, because it's at least the very beginning of it in particular is like, it's like everything is, like my mom said, everything's beautiful. I'm beautiful. You're happy. But if a soul, I guess, or a human has been a very bad human or not done, chosen wrong, that they may not have that positive experience. They may have to, I guess, I mean, like, how do I say, I guess I'm more expert on it from reading so much stuff and having the personal experience, but, it's one of those things you don't know until you're there. But as I understand it, if a human has chosen wrongly and knows very well that they're choosing wrongly, that there will not be so much fun on their way through that process, and they may have to stay there much longer than, say, a quick turnaround.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
But do you actually believe in reincarnation or no?
Oh yeah, yeah, and because of my experiences, and like I said, having my own experience where I was in France, and it was like the early 1800s, whatever. But I I was asked my address, and I'm like, well, it's, 5 Rue d'Artagnan, number 5 Rue d'Artagnan. And I'm like, oh, and I described my house, and it was like on the corner. You know how some corners are like sharp, and there's
Yeah.
yeah. I described it. It had wrought iron railings. It was whitewashed though. It was white and with black ironwork, and that was my address. And afterward I went, huh. And so I just Google, 5 Rue d'Artagnan and France. And I put in images, and there's a house just like that, except for it's red brick now, and I'm thinking, at first I was like, oh, well, I guess it's not the same place. But you think about it, and yeah, they used to whitewash brick buildings. I said, it could be. Now, could I find out any more about it? or my friend that found the place up in Boston, the name, the burial plot, the landmark next to her grave, um, and so much. My incarnation, I guess, as a Native American, I went through the whole timeline. My husband died. I'm an old lady with gray hair, and I'm sure I must have learned this someplace. So somebody could say, "Oh, well, you remember it someplace, and this is why you made this up." But we were forced to move. We were forced to pick up and leave and walk and walk and walk and walk. And I'm crying because we're leaving the only place we've ever known. And I had a year, and later I looked it up, and oh, it happened to be the timing of the Trail of Tears. And I'm like, well, that makes sense, because it didn't make sense in the event. I wasn't like, oh, I'm in the Trail of Tears. I had to look it up and put the pieces together and say, oh, so I'm an old lady, we're walking and we're going out someplace that's dry away from our woods, and we have to leave. We're being told to move. I don't know. But yeah, I think once you've had it happen, if you're deep enough, also the emotions come up very real. So it's kind of different than a dream, because you feel um, what it feels like to actually be there.
Yeah, makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I gotta reach out to this woman that was on my show to get my past life regression done. It makes me,
Well, you can reach out to me if you don't hear from her.
oh, gladly. It's so interesting. It's so interesting. But so, what do you? Well, I asked everybody this who's into the spiritual world, because everybody says that there's a great. I've been told many times, and I agree that there's a great awakening going on for the last. Some people say 5 years. Some people say since 2012, especially.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that?
Yeah, I have a friend who's very, very educated in astrology for like over 50 years. Um, and so I get a lot of information from her, but also, this whole Age of Aquarius thing. Um, it started, it's not like, oh, it started on this date at this hour. It's, depending on where you get your reference, it started like, anywhere from say 200 years ago to 20 years ago or whatever. But it takes this transition of the planets and all this, it takes a while to transition. So we're going from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. And so what things that are associated with that are an awakening, are more spirituality, are like they say, more love. Pisces apparently was, and if you think of Jesus and the sign of the fish,
Yep.
um, the Piscean age, it's kind of interesting how it all ties together. Oh, I forgot who it is, but there was a great little like 20-minute YouTube. No, it's a show called The Secret Language of Symbols or something on Gaia, but great show if you ever get that. But it was talking about the mitre, the hat on the popes is a fish tail, and
Yes.
you're like, how about that? And these symbols, and then if you go to the ages before that, different um, symbology. But so yes, I do believe it. Also, there are as far as environmentally, heating, cooling. That's one of my pet peeves. Is people are like, oh, global warming is caused by people. It was hotter on this planet before people arrived. It was way up here. So it's a natural thing. We're not helping with our pollution or whatever, but there's no way we can put the brakes on a natural cycle. We're like, floating in space, and we happen to be at a certain part on the galaxy, and there's too much that we can't jump out and stop our sun and our solar system and all that from transiting. But there are these cycles. There's a 2000, like I guess there's a 2,000-year cycle, and then there's something like a 20 to 25,000-year cycle, and we are at the edge of both of those. So we are actually at that chink, and so I believe it's true. If we think the 25,000-year cycle, I guess if we just look back, I suppose there was a lot of upheaval and flooding and whatever else happened, and knock on wood, it takes a long time to happen.
Oh, it does. I
Yeah,
mean, but a spiritual awakening is also not a bad thing.
mhm,
Like it's a good thing for the world because people
yeah,
need to get more in touch with their spiritual sides.
and
And
so
I'm not.
yeah, you will have this, when that's something's bubbling to the top, like the spiritual awakening, you're going to have conflict from the old and the new, and even internally, but yeah, I believe it's happening. And then there are people talk about fourth density into the fifth density. And I started out talking about frequencies, um, leveling up. So, I'm not the expert on all that, but I do love to read and study these things. And I've certainly seen more than one reference that are disparate, but they tie together.
Makes sense to me. And I mean, and also you got to think about the fact that, well, one, like how you said, the Earth was warmer before we were here. The Earth was also colder before we were here,
Yeah.
and it went through its own natural cycles
Yeah.
without people doing anything. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying extraterrestrials didn't do something. Who knows? But it's
What
always a
that has been,
possibility.
they have, the ice core samples, like from where it's, yeah, so they can tell that's like this history in the ice core sample of levels after level of melting and freezing, melting and freezing. So they have quite a long history. And, so I don't know that Earth, the ET could have even done that. However, you've probably seen some of those things like where like sand is melted into glass, which only
Yes.
could have happened from like some sort of nuclear blast in prehistoric times. Yeah.
Or the perfectly placed lightning strike. Yeah, basically.
Mhm. Yeah. All over some particular desert. Yeah, it's yeah. And then there's people that say, I don't believe in ETs. It's like, okay. But you know, uh,
So,
a lot of interesting stuff out there to keep me
oh, there is.
digging forever, right? Rabbit holes, lots of rabbit holes in my backyard.
Yes, exactly, and that's pretty much the tagline of my podcast is I go down so many rabbit holes I lose my way back out of them.
Yeah.
But let's go to the topic that is your specialty, like hypnosis, because I never really talked to anybody about hypnosis. How does it work actually? Like, how does it work with our minds being able to go into this trance?
Yeah. So basically, it's really fascinating. So if you can accept the idea that we're pretty much electrical, right? Because
Yes.
we've got these synapses and even our heartbeat and everything. We kind of like if our electricity stops, we're basically flatlined, right? So we are pretty much an electrical being, and so our brain waves have different. Uh, I don't want to say speeds, but levels. So there are 4 or 5 different levels. So beta is sort of like what we're at right now, and it's pretty swift, right? So if you think of taking the meter and measuring something, uh, and usually that's when you're paying attention, you're doing something new, you're driving, you have to have focus, and you're awake, right? Like really awake. And of course it goes between, from high beta might be super stressed to low beta would just be sort of like our conversation now. Then there's alpha. Alpha is when you're pretty well relaxed and the waveform starts to spread out. And so maybe you're working and you're doing something that's familiar. Low beta might be when you're driving someplace that you drive every day and you lose track of, like, you don't remember like, wait, I don't remember passing, the regular landmarks. And that's the low alpha wave is the beginning of hypnosis. And so, some taglines will be like, you go into hypnosis twice a day for sure, when you're first waking up and when you're first sleeping, because that's when you get into this half awake, half asleep state, which is theta, is after alpha. So theta can be half awake, half asleep, that dreamy state. And, slower theta is when you're in a deeper state of hypnosis. And so it's your brain waves. And then after that is delta, which is when you're sleeping. And slowest delta is deep sleep. There's also something called gamma, which is even faster than beta. They're still trying to understand it, but that's like Like they found it on like the Tibetan monks that are in like super meditation, like whew. Um, so that's it's the brain waves. And then what happens with those brain waves is our conscious mind, the one that we think with, the one that we think is making the decisions. Well, we can get it to dismiss and get out of the way when we're not talking, busy, thinking, and using it like that. When we get relaxed enough and focused. So, hypnosis is a highly focused, highly relaxed state. So, for example, you say you get the person to look at the watch or stare at a spot or look at your eyes or close your eyes and just listen to my words and let everything else disappear. You only hear my words and the music, right? And have them just let go of everything else and just focus on what I'm saying. And so if you get them to do that, then their conscious mind just kind of, you bore them to death with the conversational tone of your voice and you just lull them to sleep like a fairy tale, right? You get them to release that conscious control. And then the subconscious mind, which really runs the show, is always listening anyway. It's always paying attention anyway. So that's what happens. That's how it works, is manipulating the mind and the focus to let the conscious mind take a break, and then you're just talking to the subconscious mind. It's kind of a long answer, but I hope that explained it.
It does. It does. I mean, it makes sense because there are different waves in our head all the time. I mean, that's why certain sounds affect us certain ways. I
Mhm.
mean, there's that whole theory that certain sounds can relax us, certain sounds can
Mhm.
make people go insane if they listen to them long enough. Like it's just
Yeah.
interesting. What our minds are a complete mystery to us still, and it's funny that we've been around for over 4,000 years now, and we still have no idea how our minds really work.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's like binaural beats, for example. Um, what it does is it sends one resonance in here and another one over here. So they're disparate, but it forces your brain to match them up and create basically the level that is the desired level. So like if you look on YouTube, it says wear headphones, for these binaural beats. That's what it's doing, is it's making your auditory system go into this state of almost hypnosis.
yeah, which it's interesting. It really is. What are some? What would you say is the most interesting thing that ever happened to someone you were performing hypnosis on?
Um, well, I had a client um, who wanted to do a past life regression and was kind of on the fence about whether he even believed in past lives, and and I took him back to the source. It was being used therapeutically. It was supposed to be, but being used therapeutically to find where some issues were coming from, and and like I said, usually I say, okay, where are you? What's going on? Who else is there? So I say, well, I'm like, anyway, it turns out he's like, I'm wearing sandals and I'm wearing white. And who else is there? My brother. And we're fighting. And I'm like, okay. But as he goes on, I'm like, things aren't making sense. Like I'm picturing, okay, and I'm like, what year is it? There's no year, and I'm like, well, where are you? I'm nowhere, or, something like this. So as it goes on, he is experiencing a past life as Gabriel the angel.
I was gonna say it sounds like
Yeah.
Bible times.
And he's having a fight with his brother Lucifer. And
Oh,
yeah. And anyway, so, but that wasn't such the heaviest part of it. Is so, we work through that, and I, bring him back out. And he's slow to come back. And I'm like, okay, well, I said, well, that was quite an experience. How are you feeling? What do you think of that? And he says, I don't remember anything. And I'm like, you don't remember anything? No, why? What happened? I'm like, okay, well, I have it all recorded. Yeah. So I think that was the most unusual um, thing in particular because you thought, well, maybe he's kind of like not making it up, but going someplace that made sense to him. But for the fact that he didn't even remember it made me really go, huh, isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's insane. That's insane though. To remember yourself being Gabriel, and I mean, I actually I just listened to the audio version of my God, how am I forgetting this? Not Prometheus, but the story Lucifer's version of the story of him falling. I can't remember what the hell it's called right now. God, it's gonna annoy the crap out of me now. Mm. I'll see if I think of it in a minute, but that's making me mad. I know what
That's a whole nother rabbit hole, is like Lucifer, Satan, not Satan, just Lucifer. And Lucifer,
yeah.
is he really bad, or is he the bringer of light? And, and who threw him under the bus? Was it the Catholic Church, or, um, the snakes? Snakes is
Yeah.
a thing. And why'd they get such a bad name when they're actually gods in so many, they're really revered and have been worshipped even in some societies for bringing wisdom and for representing, light or intelligence. And it's like, ah,
Yeah. Oh my God, I can't think what this is called. It's gonna drive me nuts. But
yeah.
how can someone strengthen like their own intuitive powers though, like so they can possibly even like hypnotize themselves in a way?
Mm-hmm. Um, so that's kind of like another one of those questions that has two answers. Um, um, something else I've done is I do have a course on building personal intuition. But what I did with that, so some of the exercises that I've talked about there are getting in touch with your brain and your body, because your body really does act as sort of like a Geiger counter, a feedback system. So, and we use the words all the time, like, oh, my heart was broken, or I felt it in my gut, or, we use these automatically, but we don't give it, as a society, we don't honor that. We always go, well, I've got to logically think this out, right? And
Yes.
so the more that you can pay attention to how your body feels when you are encountering a situation, or when you need to make a decision, or when you want to really know how you feel about something. So someone says, how do you feel? You're like, I don't know. It's like, it's you. What do you mean you don't know? I don't know how I feel, right? So to train ourselves to kind of sit quietly, not necessarily, it doesn't have to be meditation, but it can be to sit quietly and think. So among the exercises that I might use is to think of a time when you've been really angry, right? Or something that you're still angry about. And then kind of scan your body and say, where am I feeling that? What happens when I think or feel angry? And then kind of like get to know, oh, that's anger. Okay, then think about when you're feeling happy. Find that feeling in your body. So those are some tools for building more self-awareness. And the same thing, you're walking down the street, and who hasn't maybe gotten that sort of weird feeling, like the hair on the back of your neck thing, or you see somebody and you cross the street to the other side, or sometimes you see somebody coming and you don't feel that fear. So just being more in touch with your body's language, telling you, more than your brain can tell you. Self-hypnosis, on the other hand, is not that easy, but if you practice, just like you say meditation, if you practice, it can get easier. Um, and the trick would be, some of the things that will help are repeating a phrase in your head. So say you want to achieve something, like I feel motivated to do my homework, right? Say if I had a student, I love doing my homework. I really enjoy my schoolwork, right? And if that's what somebody wants, they can just sit down and say it out loud, say it in their head over and over again. Maybe even play some music in the background. I really enjoy my homework. I really enjoy my homework. I really enjoy my homework. And it's like not so much like affirmations, but repeating something to yourself for what your goal is. Um, could be like something that you can use. And if you sit there and with the music with the right pace, get some of that like, you know, om chanting in the background or something, or bells or something that really has the right um, repetitive sound. You know, like for example, if something has a tink, 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 even a metronome, something like that will help set your brain to that sort of hypnotic state. You could stare at a flame while you think it. So there's that focus to kind of help not, you know, distract you, keep you from being distracted, focus on something visually, as well as focus on repeating in your mind something that you want to be true.
And that makes sense. That makes sense. I mean, we all do it all the time. If we like, when we want to lose weight, like we tell ourselves, "You will not eat chocolate. You will not eat chocolate. Like you will not
And
eat
then you want
chocolate." Like,
chocolate, don't you? I don't know. There's that, or you could say, I can have all the chocolate that I want, but I'm choosing to not have chocolate. I love using words too. So, like, as a tip to people out there, remember, most behaviors, you are making a choice. Because as soon as you feel like someone says you can't, doesn't that just make you want to touch it or eat it? Or, yeah. So,
yeah,
yeah. So I always remind people that you're choosing. You know, you can choose to have the chocolate, or you can choose not to have the chocolate. Even better, you can choose to say, I can have the chocolate, but I'm going to wait a day, or I'm going to wait 2 hours. And if I still want the chocolate, then I can have some chocolate. And I can choose to have just a bite instead of the whole thing. You know, so that's just some weight loss advice for anybody who's, you know, trying to work on it on their own.
and just to jump back for a second, the story I was trying to think of about Lucifer was Paradise Lost,
Oh, okay.
because that's
Yeah, I
that's
knew
just
the title. I didn't know that's what it was about. Okay. Huh.
yeah. Paradise Lost is John Milton's version of, it's the story of Lucifer and his beginning to question the angels and God, and
Huh.
basically it's the story of his fall and him basically learning it's better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. But
Huh. I'm going to have to check
it's
that out. Yeah, I'm
yeah,
interested.
Parcast Parcast Mythology podcast just did an amazing 4-part series on it, and that's why I listen to. And it's, I mean, Parcast does a good job at anything they do, but they did a really good job of that story, and it makes you like, you could feel it, like you could feel the emotion behind like the actors' voices. Like it's so good. It's just,
Oh, what was the
and
name of
plus that
the podcast
Paradise,
again?
it's Parcast. It's their mythology podcast. It's
Cool.
just called, it's called Mythology. But so
I like.
before we wrap it up here, let me ask you: do you work with clients just in person or virtually as well?
I do both. Yeah. And actually, I've been moving more into virtually, and I'm looking to start doing more with groups um, because I have a lot of stuff, other stuff going on that, you know, I love my in-person clients, but I like the freedom of like we're doing right here.
Yes.
Just pop it on, and plus it's easier for me to see people like in the evening or something like that when I might not normally, you know, schedule someone. You know, it's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's easier for them
It,
too, but I can see
it,
people far away that way too.
and it makes sense. No one has to worry about traffic or getting there on time.
Hmm.
It's just, you just have to be sitting in your living room or your bedroom or something and turn on your computer and go.
Yeah,
So
it's great.
make so where can they find you if they want to try to book an appointment with you?
Yeah, so I think probably the easiest way. So I have two websites, but they both, like, one of them points you toward the other. You know, on some stuff they both list each other in there too. So maybe the easiest one to remember would be Intuitive Journey with Desiree. Um, so that's also the, you know, the name from my podcast YouTube, but it's also one of my websites, Intuitive Journey with Desiree. And on there, it'll point you to my other website if it's not on that one, which is transhypnotherapy.com. So they're both a .com, and trans hypnotherapy is TRANS hypnotherapy, short for transpersonal, which I chose before the trans thing came out. But hey, it's trans whatever you want, right?
Exactly.
Transatlantic, transunion, transformative, but transpersonal. So trans hypnotherapy is my website that has, all my certifications, sessions, and pricing. But the you can get there via the other intuitivejourneywithdesiree.com as well.
Sounds good. And I will, of course, put links, all the links that for these on the podcast description as well, so people can just click a link. But and I want to thank you for coming on, Desiree. It's been an honor to have you on, and I learned a lot today, and I hope my listeners will learn a lot too when they hear this, and I hope our watchers learned a lot as well.
Thanks for
So,
having me. This is
oh
fun. Yeah.
my pleasure, my pleasure. And for all my listeners, you know where you can find me, and I will catch you in half a week for the next episode. And we thank Desiree once again for coming on. It's been an amazing show, and I will see you all next time.